So good afternoon, everyone. Good to have you here. Once again, my name is Mike McMullen. I'm president of the Carroll County Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for coming out. Always a nice big group to hear Mr. Zaleski speak. It's my honor to introduce the MC of the event, which is always going to be our chair, and we have a new chair of the board, so put your hands together for Mr. Jason Stambaugh of DTS Connects. Jason.
Thank you, sir. This is my first lunch, so I hope I don't blow it. But again, everyone, hello. My name is Jason Stambaugh. I'm currently the director of partner experience for a local tech firm here that is located in downtown Westminster called DTS Connects. And as Mike said, I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the board this year. So Mike already said it, but I just want to say it again. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your schedules to join us for this event, and I hope you are enjoying your lunch. And today, as you know, we're gathered to an event which is what we call our annual Carroll County Budget Luncheon. And every time I come, I'm always stunned that there's anyone here because it's terrible marketing and branding. It sounds like it should only have one round table for the few accounting geeks that we have. But this event, Ted Zaleski, he's the Director of Management and Budget for Carroll County. Ted has been doing this for many, many years and does an incredible job of really making numbers interesting. And for me, someone who doesn't like much, I don't really much like numbers, I really love a good story. Ted does a really, really good job of bringing story out of those numbers. So we're very, very excited to hear from him and all the new stuff he has to share this year. So I have a bunch of thank yous to do. All these events take a lot of folks to make them happen. The first, this event is being filmed. So, and not just filmed, but also being live streamed by our friends at the Community Media Center of Carroll County. Let's give them a round of applause. So if you're wowed by what Ted has to share, you'll be able to share this on social media. The videos will be up online, be on the Chamber website as well as on the CMC's web properties. Check those out and share them with folks. Now today, the other big thank yous in these events, it takes sponsors to really support and make all of these events happen. And ever since I've been a Chamber member, the same two folks have sponsored this event, in which today, I'm super pleased to introduce you to, we have Sherry Crasium-Bolin. She's a tax partner for RLH CPAs and Business Advisors. Let's give her a round of applause. And with us today, we also have Dave Peliquin. He's the president of Main Street Advisors. And so our first sponsor message will be delivered by, again, Sherry Crasium-Bolin. So please come on up. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Jason. I'll try not to geek you out with the accounting stuff, promise. Again, I'm Sherry Crasium-Bolin. I'm the tax partner with RLH CPAs and Business Advisors. We do have offices in Westminster on Main Street, also in Frederick, Maryland, and Hanover, Pennsylvania. I'd like to introduce real quickly, a couple of my partners are here as well. Wanda Lynn. Is Tom Hauk here? And Carl Lehman. And also with us today is Collins Lethbridge, who's in our Westminster office. Last year around this time, we were all kind of just in the midst of trying to understand a new tax law that had passed that brought us a myriad of changes, more changes than we've seen in over 30 years in the tax law. So I'm not sure if Ted will touch on any of this at all, but just real quickly, I did throw out a handout for everybody with some highlights on that. We've spent the year trying to digest all of that, and we do know that that's going to impact nearly every single taxpayer this year. And some of you may have already realized some of those changes in your own situation now. One thing I wanted to highlight, just a couple of things. I could stand up here all day and talk, but Mike would just boot me. And but real quickly, one thing, if you're a business owner, a small business owner, the vast majority of small business owners are pass-through entities of some sort, a sole proprietorship, S-corp, partnership, that sort. So one of the big law changes was an additional deduction for those types of owners of 20% basically of your net operating income, your net taxable income. That's a pretty big deal. And they had to do something, because they made that flat tax rate of 21% for C corporations. And so they passed that along. Now, it's been very, very challenging to figure out. But if you are a small business owner, I do just implore you to get some professional help with your taxes this year if you do not already do that. Could be a substantial deduction for you and your business. And I can't even go into all the details, but it is pretty substantial, and you should really look into that, make sure that you're taking advantage of that. The other thing I wanted to point out real quickly is that the Maryland taxes last year, we were kind of speculating, were they going to change anything? And they really didn't. And you will notice potentially that our Maryland taxpayers may have a higher Maryland tax bill this year, depending on where they're at, because a lot of the changes in the federal law might have increased our adjusted gross income, which is where Maryland starts. So in effect, depending on what you do on your federal tax return, it could, of course, lower your federal taxable income, but it will maybe increase your AGI and therefore increase your tax bill for Maryland. So just something to be on the lookout for. That's a really great standard deduction they offered us with $24,000 at the federal level, but it's much smaller in Maryland. So just be on the lookout for that as well. There could be some things you want to look out for. One last thing then, before I go, one nice little thing that they put in the tax law that I think is overlooked a little bit is the qualified opportunity zones. There's some tax incentives to possibly defer capital gains taxes or even eliminate 15% of them if you had a large capital gain and invest in one of these. There is one fairly large tract here in Carroll, so something to look into. And Maryland is also offering grant incentives on top of the federal tax savings. So just a little things, if you didn't hear of them before and you have a large capital gain and some money to invest in Carroll, make sure you look into those as well. So that's all. Highlights.
Thank you.
And one thing I neglected to do before was do a cell phone check. Please make sure your cell phones are silenced as well. Thanks. All right, now I'd like to invite up Dave Peliquin, President of Main Street Advisors, LLC.
Thank you. One way you know you're getting older is every year it feels like it's only been 3-4 months since we've all gotten together and listened to Ted. So it's good to see everybody. My name's Dave Peliquin. Main Street Advisors is actually is our 20th year this year. Serving Westminster, we're a fiduciary, fee-only investment advisory firm. Enough about us. What I thought I would do today, and then be real quick, because everybody's really here to listen to Ted. Because I got here late, I've got handouts for everybody, but what it refers to is we had I remember it's been a long time doing this because I spoke from the podium one time, maybe 10 years ago, and just mentioned that there had been somebody selling securities, you saw in the paper 2 or 3 weeks ago, and probably know that there was an insurance outfit, or it doesn't matter what kind of outfit, but the New Wealth, with Ron Morley, and I've got handouts, and it's just top 10 questions to ask financial advisors, and also how to limit your chances of being a victim. I had a client not through Morley, but through, excuse me, a computer scam, lose about $60,000 last year, and I'm frankly, pretty careful about watching, and this woman was one of those romance things, and people that know her would have no way of knowing, and she's not told anybody, but it was about $70,000. And luckily, that's not her only $70,000. But the fact is, for some people, things like this really does hurt. I happen to believe, especially with this lady, recent widow, we're dealing with the elderly population, 70 and up. Maybe they become widowed. Maybe they've always been alone. I'll tell you from this woman, they're very self-sufficient. You don't think that she needs any help. So when I pass these around, and I'm going to have to kind of, since I got here late, so they're not sitting on your table, don't think of just yourselves, and maybe not even just your mom. Think of your mom's friends, your mom's neighbors, your aunt's neighbors, and maybe be a little more proactive. Like we all know with things going on in the world, we've got to notice more things and maybe take a little action. And it's really to find out that let's say it's your mom's neighbor and you've gotten to know her. You might have to actually proactively ask something when the opportunity arises, and it might be something like if they're working with BB&T, if they're working with John's company, if they drop names that you know, oh, Vanguard, oh, Schwab, oh, Merrill Lynch. It's when you hear, well, a friend of mine recommended this guy or this gal. You want to ask a few more questions. And there are websites. The thing is that economic crime units, the county office of the Attorney General, they've got websites, they've got 800 numbers. It's not for lack of resources. It's because people that are making these decisions, a CD matures for $50,000, and the rates, they're getting better, but they're not what they used to be. And so people, they're just trying to keep their retirement income up. And so it probably is going to take us paying a little more attention. So that's all I had. I know it's such a upbeat note. I always seem to have those. And the good news, though, is that Ted's probably got some real upbeat news for us for the county. So I won't be any worse than what you're going to hear. So I'm going to take a couple more minutes and walk these around. So just humor me with that. And everybody have a great day, and thanks for coming.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks so much, Dave. So, open invitation for anyone who would like to be either Dave or Sherry or represent your company at one of these events. We've got lots of sponsorship opportunities available. You can reach out to Mike at the Chamber to get your name on the list for one of our upcoming events. All right, so now we're about ready to move on to to introduce the star of our show. I know that many of you know Mr. Ted Zaleski, but to give you a sense for those who may not know him as well, a bit about his resume. So first fact, he's been with the county for over 25 years, and 17 of those has been spent as the Director of Management and Budget. Ted also serves as the president of the Maryland Association of Counties Budget and Finance Affiliate and has done so since it launched over a decade ago. He's the past president of the Maryland Government Finance Officers Association. He's served on the Government Finance Officers Association Budgeting and Fiscal Policy Committee. Man, this is like really challenging my ability here. He's also served on the Towson University School of Business and Economics Advisory Committee. He's an adjunct instructor at McDaniel College, and he's helped develop a new public administration and policy graduate program there. With that list, there's no doubt that Ted knows what he's talking about, and I think that's the bottom line there. And we're very, very honored to have him. In addition to all of his professional accomplishments, Ted lives here just outside of Westminster, and he's looking forward to talking to you about the budget and fiscal issues facing our county in 2019. Without further ado, Ted, you're welcome up here.
Well, Dave's talking about upbeat. They don't call me Mr. Doom and Gloom for nothing. Yeah, I gave Mike and Peggy a list of things that they could choose from for my introduction. I didn't actually expect them to use all of those things. I apologize for you all having to sit through listening to that whole list. Jason talked about thinking this might be boring, and that I try and bring the stories out in it. Actually, over the years, I've done many presentations to many people, small groups, large groups, and that's always on my mind. It's one thing to tell people a bunch of information. It's another to tell them in a way that is interesting to them. And one of my favorite compliments to get is after I've done a presentation somewhere, somebody will come up to me and say, "Oh, I thought this was going to be really boring, but you were interesting," or "I hate numbers, but I understood what you were talking about." Then I feel like, okay, I got the job done. And Sherry wondered if I was going to talk about the federal taxes. I was not planning to. Every year this is a struggle to figure out. There's all this stuff I can talk about. Mike wants me to talk for 12 minutes. So, you can't hear everything. So I'll just say about the federal taxes, it's constantly on my mind now because income tax is our second biggest revenue, and it's always difficult to figure out what's happening, now even more difficult than it's ever been. And I wrote down a note, somebody else said something, 3 months. Don't remember why I wrote it. All right. So last year, I speculated that even though they were retiring, Steve Guthrie and Sandy Ox would be here. They're not here. I'm a little bit disappointed. Lynn Wheeler, though, even though she retired, is here. And I just want to point out here for the first time is Lynn's replacement, Andrea Bursler, the director at the library. And she's still here? Oh, there she is. And somebody I met just briefly a week or so ago, Molly Dolan at the Youth Service Bureau. Okay, I'm going to start off with a piece of good news. As of last fall, Carroll County is now a AAA rating from all three major rating agencies. And this is really a pretty big deal. There's somewhere, I think, between 1% and 2% of the 3,100 or so counties in the United States who have a AAA. We sometimes get a little bit complacent about it in Maryland, because Maryland is a very highly rated state. I think we have maybe 9 jurisdictions that are AAAs, but that's extremely unusual. It's just not the way it works. And Moody's had been the holdout for us. We had Fitch and we had Standard & Poor's for a number of years, and Moody's wouldn't make the move. But we found the secret. The day we were supposed to head to New York to meet with rating agencies, I wasn't feeling well, and I stayed home. And we came back with Moody's AAA. If only I had thought about it a few years ago. Okay, so the timing of this event actually precedes the budget process starting up in the public way. So you get a little peek into my mind, and I know a few said, no, please, I don't want to peek in his mind. But a little peek in my mind as I prepare for the budget process and working with the commissioners and beginning their deliberations. So I will be meeting with them on March 7th for what we call our overview, which is a look at the revenue projections and then some of the challenges we'll be facing as we go through the budget process. Then on the 26th, I go to them with a recommended budget, which then becomes the starting point for their discussions, their decisions that lead to eventually the proposed budget that they will offer to all of you. Now, the Great Recession ended in 2009. Children born during the Great Recession are nearing middle school age. So you're saying, so why are you still talking about this? And the reason I'm still talking about it is because for Carroll County government and for the services and facilities and infrastructure that you all rely on, the last decade has been dominated by the recession and the aftermath of the recession. I've spent the last decade trying to understand what happened to us and what it means and where do we go from here. Those of you who have been coming to this for a while, you might remember me talking when we started feeling the impact of the recession, that for a number of years we were chasing revenues down. We kept saying, how much worse can it get? And we kept being wrong over and over. It got worse and worse, beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Then we hit bottom and things weren't getting worse anymore. Then I started thinking about, okay, well, time for the bounce back. And in other recessions, things went down and then they came back up again. So we're waiting for that to happen. And it wasn't happening. See, this is a little disappointing. It's supposed to have been better than this by now. And an idea has been kind of nagging at my mind for a few years now, and just recently became clear for me. And that is, we've gotten the bounce that we're going to get. This is it. And I was thinking about this, and I got thinking about tennis balls. For any of you tennis players or used to play tennis, you pull out a new ball out of the can, you bounce it, right back up into your hand. But if someone slips an old ball in there, you bounce it, and it doesn't come back up to your hand. It stops somewhere on the way. And that's what this feels like to me. We all expected that ball to hit back in our palm, but it's not going to make it. So why is that? And the things I'm going to talk about now, I don't think there's anything new. These are all things I've talked about before, you've heard before, but I'm just starting to put them together in this larger picture of we've got the bounce that we're going to get. So what are some of the things that have changed? Population growth in Carroll County has slowed significantly. The next census is likely to show that the last decade we will have grown slower than any decade since the 1940s. We've gotten used to a level of growth in Carroll County and all the implications of that we're just not seeing now. And also in our population is aging. Of course, some of us are aging, but I mean the proportions of our population are changing. And we're getting a bigger number of old people and a smaller number of people at their peak earning years. In the state comptroller's office, there's a group called the Bureau of Revenue Estimates. And they did a study analysis half a year ago, maybe, looking at this idea of an aging population and its relationship to income tax collections. And it's a pretty scary report. You know, they show in a pretty compelling way we can quantify the impact that this change in our demographics is having on income tax collections, a negative impact. We are collecting less money than we would have expected in the past or under other circumstances. State revenue is almost gone from our operating budget. Again, this is not a new idea, just another piece of this picture. In our operating budget now, money that's coming to us from the state is, I think, 0.2%. You know, it's almost nothing. Now, there is still state funding coming to us for capital purposes, like Ag Pres and program open space money for rec and parks. But in the operating, it's really not much of a factor anymore. The state, since the recession, has passed on about $8 million of annual costs to us. This is money they used to pay for things that we pay today. And this is about teacher pensions and the cost of running the Department of Assessments and Taxation. That's $8 million that commissioners could have made choices with. And the list of things that could have gone to is very, very long. But the state made the decision for them. They said, here, you get to pay this $8 million a year. Don't think about other uses because they're not available to you anymore. Mandates, also not a new idea, but again, a piece of this picture. And it's not because mandates are new, but it just keeps growing. There are more and more federal and state mandates. And again, every time another level of government says, Carroll County, here's what you have to do, that's a choice the commissioners don't get to make with local revenue for local needs. We could spend this entire session talking about mandates, but I'm just going to mention two to give you a sense of the different kinds of things we can talk about. One, Clean Water Act from 1972 or something like that. This comes under the EPA, and then Maryland Department of Environment takes care of it locally. We are spending millions of dollars a year on stormwater management, clean water activities. Now, I'm not going to suggest we wouldn't be doing anything if these mandates weren't in place, but we might be going about it differently. We might be spending money less quickly. Maybe we'd be not doing some of the things that we're doing. But all those millions of dollars, if it's a choice the commissioners had made to do it, that's one thing. But we're mostly doing it because somebody else said, here, you have to do this. A smaller one, but a different sort of idea. The Board of Elections, a state agency, is entirely funded by the county. It's not quite this way, but it's pretty close to they send us a bill and we send them a check. In recent years, and this goes back a long ways, but in recent years, some things have been happening. And I'm not arguing whether these are good things or not, just that somebody else is making a choice on how to spend local money. Same-day registration, additional voting sites, and early voting. These are all additional annual costs for Carroll County, and those total up to something along the lines of $150,000 a year. That's, again, $150,000 that could have been a choice to do something else that the commissioners saw as a priority. And our revenue picture has changed. And again, those of you who have been coming to this have heard me talk about various pieces of this. I'm just tying this together with all these other things I'm talking about now. Property tax, our largest revenue, just this year surpassed what we collected in fiscal year 11. That's really big. 8 years ago, we were collecting as much in property tax as we are today. And that's something pushing 60% of all of our revenue. So, it's not this simple, but if you wanted just a nice, simple, well, why are things different? You probably don't have to look any further than that. If your biggest revenue is still trying to catch up to almost a decade ago, something has to change. Because of the change in our assessable base and our property tax, income tax, our second largest revenue, has become more important to us. It's a bigger piece of our puzzle, which is a problem because income tax is notoriously difficult for us to project and very volatile. It changes without any warning. We think everything's fine, and then all of a sudden it's not. That's become a bigger part of what we're trying to deal with in the moment, but also as we're trying to look 6 years into the future. After those two revenues, our revenues get much, much smaller. But the next few biggest ones, even though they are relatively small, recordation, highway user revenue, income on our investments, permits, all of them are still lower today than they were years ago. The year for each one of them would be different, but we're talking about 5 years, 10 years. It's fundamentally changed our ability to say, okay, we have the money to fund those services and facilities and infrastructure. It's become much more, it was always challenging, but it's become much more of a challenge. Okay, we've got 10 things to do. We can only do one of them. Which one is that going to be? And the commissioners always make the wrong decision. People will be glad to tell you. Some of you might remember about 15 years or so ago, a lot of debate over concurrency management and adequate public facilities ordinance. The reason that whole thing got started, because there were concerns back then that we would generate permits, 1,200, 1,400 a year. We were saying we can't keep up. We're not able to provide all the things that go along with living in Carroll County to all these new homes. That's no longer a worry. We're doing about 300 permits a year now. That could change. I have no way to tell you it's not, but there's a lot of things getting in the way of that changing. And I don't see, I hate to say any possibility, but I don't see any likelihood that we ever get back to 1,000 units a year. It's just a fundamental change in how things work here. And there were expenditure side challenges with 1,200 units versus 300, but there's also been a significant loss of revenue between 1,200 and 300 units a year. Our budgets are leaner. They've had to be. I mean, even if we didn't want them to be, there really hasn't been any choice. And arguably, a lean budget is a good thing, but there are some problems that come with it too. The leaner you are, that means the less places there are in the budget to go to if something unexpected happens. Less flexibility to deal with the things that you haven't planned for. And we're experiencing that. There was a time when the commissioners in the middle of the year could have come to me and said, Ted, I know we didn't budget this project, but we need to find money to make this happen. And my answer back then would have been, okay, I'm sure we'll do that. Let me figure out what changes we need to make, what decisions we'll need to make. My answer now is no, we don't have it. And that might not be literally true, but it's pretty much true. There's just no extra money. The choice to do something we haven't planned on almost inevitably now is tied to making other choices to say, well, we thought we were going to do this, but now we're not going to. I know there's a lot of papers up here, but this is 30 fonts, so it's not as much as it looks like. Okay, so things have changed for us. We're in a different spot. We can't think about things like we did 15 years ago. It won't work. But that's not the end of the story. The next recession is coming. We are closest to the longest economic expansion this country has ever had. Now, I'm not predicting when the recession is coming, and recessions are notoriously difficult to predict. And there's an economist guy named Paul Samuelson who was commenting on one methodology for predicting recessions, and he said, yeah, that one predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions. Took a second, but so I'm not going to say it's next month, it's next year, it's 2 years from now. But I think it would be foolish to think that we are beyond the idea of recessions and that one isn't going to ever come again. When that next recession comes, there are tools that we used to cope in the last recession that are not going to be available to us this time around. Last time, the commissioners eliminated about 100 positions. These are positions that report to the commissioners. And we're not talking about the school system, the community college, the library, the health department. These are the people who actually report to the commissioners, about 12% of their workforce. We have not come anywhere near adding back those 100 positions. So in theory, if you got rid of them, added them all back, we have another recession, you could do it again, but we don't have it to do again. If we went to eliminate another 100 positions sometime in our near future, I don't know how we could possibly conceive of doing it without making significant decisions about what services and what levels of service that we offer. Any idea that we could just make do would be misguided. We shut down capital projects. If we had to do something today, we have very few capital projects to shut down. The things we are doing that are new initiatives, not maintaining the infrastructure we already have, there's just not very much happening, so there's not very much to go to if we needed to find ways of balancing the budget. We swept up cash, and we went all through the capital budget and said, okay, there's a little money here, there's a little money here, there's a little money here, pulled that all in as part of balancing the operating budget. And we drew down on some cash balances. Like in our Ag Pres capital project, we had built up some money that had no plans for immediate use. And it's not that it wouldn't have been used someday, but there was no immediate plans. We lowered how much we were budgeting for a few years and drew down those cash balances. That cash balance isn't there now. We can't do that again. That cash isn't in the capital budget anymore. We can't go back to that again. We reduced debt. Our outstanding debt in fiscal year 11 was about $330 million. We're now down to about $240 million, a drop of about 25%. We can't do it again. Now, if we let the debt go back up that high again, we could do it again, but we can't afford to do that. We can't afford the debt service to go back there. So again, you start thinking about all these things and how it's changed, and that's what's led me to okay, we've got the bounce that we're going to get. So my musings about how everything have changed are interesting to me at least. But the commissioners are still left to make decisions here and now with the revenue that they have available and the needs that are in front of them. All this is nice for explaining how we got here, but doesn't help you do anything about it. Take a look backwards for a little bit. We have a new board in place. All 5 board members are here. They got announced earlier. But look at the board that just ended their 4-year term. What choices did they make? Now, whenever I talk about numbers like this, it's not this simple because there's a lot of moving parts in the budget. So don't fall in love with these numbers. I'm just giving these to you so you have a sense of what choices were made. Over 4 years, over 4 budgets, the total increase in budgets that the commissioners had was $42.8 million, 12% change over 4 years, or something less than 3% a year. So modest growth. The total change for Carroll County Public Schools, the biggest budget we fund, was $21.4 million, or half of the available dollars. They grew about 13%. So, and this almost has to be true. They're about half of our budget, and they grew in a way that was very comparable to how the entire budget grew. the school's budget probably gets more conversation than anything else in the budget, and lots of ideas come up about, how you should fund, what we need to do. But just, if you think about this, if the entire county budget is growing 3%, and the schools are about half of that budget, say for talking purposes, say the commissioners wanted the school system to grow 5% a year. Not even a question of do we want to or not. Let's just make that a given for the moment. Half of our budget to grow 5% means everything else would actually have to be declining every year. And clearly, we have no ability to make everything else in the budget go down every year. The sheriff, and this would include the detention center, $6 million increase, 32% change over 4 years. Carroll Community College, $2.5 million increase, a 33% change over 4 years. 911, $1.8 million, 41%. This is almost all about adding people. It's been a while now, but we made transition from the state police to the sheriff as our law enforcement. And we've been slowly feeling our way to how many people do we need in 911. What's the fewest number of people we can have in 911 and get the job done? And we've continued to add people over time as we try and find our way to that number. And we have things like Mount Airy created a police force, and we took on the responsibility for their 911. And that story's not necessarily over yet. We're still trying to figure it out. Our nonprofit service providers, $1 million increase, 38%. A big part of that went to Youth Service Bureau for providing drug treatment and to human services programs for keeping up with our shelter programs. That reminds me, another first-timer, Scott Yard, the new director at HSP, is here too. Yeah. Okay, now in all those, I'm not making any argument that those increases shouldn't have happened. There were good reasons for all of them. And every one of those agencies, I believe, probably could make very reasonable arguments. Well, yeah, it was nice we got that, but we really needed more. The problem is you can only give out the number of dollars that you have. And as we look toward this next 4 years of budgets with this Board of Commissioners, we're going to continue to face these same challenges. Okay, now looking ahead a little bit at things that we haven't planned for yet. Some of you may have heard of a thing called the Kirwan Commission. It's actually called the Maryland Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. They're appointed by the General Assembly. They've been working for 2 years. Their mission was to examine how education is provided in Maryland and how education is funded in Maryland. They've been working for 2 years, just released what they call their interim report. This interim report is really kind of their final report minus one piece. They have an extensive list of changes on the education side. I'm not even going to try and tackle the things that they're talking about there. They have put costs on their recommendations. The one thing they haven't done is talk about how will this be divided between the state and the county. Who's going to pick up what costs? This is a 240-page document or something like that. But I'm going to hit on just a few big items. Among the changes that are included in their recommendations, one is to improve teacher salaries. And their recommendation is that the minimum salary for every teacher in every county in the state, phased in after over 3 years, is $60,000. There'll be a huge price tag to this. And there's a ripple effect to this that I have not seen that they've dealt with yet. If you think about, you're a 6-year teacher who's making $61,000, and now this first-year teacher is getting $60,000, you're probably going to say, wait a second, I don't like this picture. What is that going to mean? What's going to happen after that? And this also, collective bargaining remains in place. So if this all happens, there will be a floor on salaries, but it says nothing about what else happens after that. Whatever price tag they put on it, my guess is they've underestimated how much it's really going to cost. A second thing is to reduce the amount of time teachers spend in the classroom, to allow more time for collaboration, planning, working with at-risk students, all the other things that you can't do while you're standing in front of the classroom. To get where they want to go will require hiring more than 14,000 additional teachers across the state. Again, it's not hard to figure a huge additional cost. And then the third piece I want to mention is an expansion of pre-kindergarten. Years ago, we had half-day kindergarten in Carroll County. The state mandated full-day kindergarten. There were implications of that we're still dealing with. We offer pre-K to a relatively small number of students in Carroll County. This would significantly expand. And there's a lot of interesting details to this, but we don't have time to get into it. It's going to be another big piece of this. So the cost estimate, the Kirwan Commission has said the cost for all these recommendations will be, at full implementation, $3.8 billion a year. Now, that is net of what they have identified as offsets, places where spending this money is going to save somebody somewhere else. I haven't dug into all that yet, but my starting point is a high level of skepticism. I think what we're going to find is, sometimes, I'm not picking on drug treatment, but somebody will say, if you spend this $100,000 on drug treatment, you're going to save X number of dollars in the detention center. Well, it generally doesn't work that way. Unless you can really make a fundamental shift in what you have to do in one place, it doesn't translate. You won't get those savings. I think we're going to see a lot of stuff like that. But let's say, for argument's sake, that $3.8 billion is the right number. And I have to be careful there, because I keep saying 3.8 million, and that gets okay, well, that's a lot of money, but not that big a deal. 3.8 billion usually catches people's attention, though. But let's say that's the right number, and let's assume for the moment that this is going to be an equal split of funding responsibility, half of it to the state, half of it to all the counties. I'm not suggesting that this is the way it's going to work out, but for many things, when we want to look at what is Carroll County's part of a statewide number, we figure about 3%. 3% of $1.9 billion is $57 million a year. Our budget this year is $411 million. Now, again, I'm not expecting that to happen, but you see, even if it's much smaller than that, this is going to be a very difficult thing for us to figure out. How do we manage this? And in Annapolis, it seems the inclination is to move ahead with this. Whether it's exactly what they recommended, I don't know. But I'm not betting against this happening. So there will be costs coming our way. We have no identifiable way of funding these additional costs, so we'll be left with some interesting choices. Another thing that's coming our way that's going to cost us something, but we can't quantify it yet. We are in the middle of discussions about transitioning from a volunteer fire rescue EMS service to a consolidated fire EMS rescue service, which would mean a volunteer system working collaboratively with a county career system. This will cost more than we're currently budgeting. I have no way right now to say how much more it's going to be. And again, whatever it is, right now I don't know where the money would come from. But one thing I think is really important to understand on this isn't about the numbers. A lot of people have misunderstood this. This is not about the county reaching out and saying, we want to take over these services. This is about the volunteers coming to the county saying, something needs to happen here. We're struggling. The cracks are showing. We need to know that there's going to be a way for services to continue. The first step has already been taken. Last year in the General Assembly, we got legislation passed that gives the commissioners authority to actually provide these services. We did not have authority before. If we had been facing a situation where the stress became so great that some volunteer companies stopped providing services, we had no authority to step in to do something about that. So a group of volunteers has been working very diligently putting together a picture of what this might look like. Conversations are just starting now with the commissioners. So this will be an interesting one to follow. And then one last thing coming our way that I can't quantify yet. We talked about 911 before. We have something coming our way now called Next Generation 911, basically recognizing that the world of landline phone calls is not where we are anymore. Even with cell phones, while those calls go through, 911 centers can't pinpoint where that phone is. But there are lots of other ways people can communicate now, and I don't know what all will end up in the mix, but people can get in through their iPad or Instagram, or I don't know if you do it for Facebook, but there are other ways that people want to maybe not want to, but here's what I've got right now. I've got an emergency. Here's how I want to contact you. This is going to have implications for the number of people we need in the 911 center, and nobody fully understands what this is going to mean yet. But you're going to be having different kind of communications. Okay, that's Mike telling me it's time to stop. What was I saying?
Sorry about that.
Oh yeah. We don't know what this is going to mean. What will be the mix of communications that are going to come into you? How long is that going to keep somebody tied up with one emergency? What information are we going to have to keep, and what is that going to mean? So there's lots of big questions. All right, and I actually was to my ending point. There's a lot more that we can talk about, but only so much time. So that's where I will stop, and then we have time for questions. All right.
5 minutes.
You mentioned from 2011 to present, the tax revenue is about the same. What about the commercial developments in Westminster, the airport, in South Carroll, some in North Carroll that have blossomed through the next? Don't they boss?
Ted, could you
Yep.
repeat the question?
Yep.
Excuse me, sorry. On the back.
Yep. John was asking about commercial industrial development. We've had a string of successes in recent years, but that's in those numbers. So without those, we would not even have caught up to fiscal year 11 at this point. And and something people, let's say, don't understand, but probably never really thought about. When we have a new big project for Carroll County, say $40 million come in, that creates about $400,000 a year of property tax revenue, which is a nice boost for us, but not a budget changer. You need a lot of projects to really see significant change in the budget. There was somebody over this. Let them get the microphone to you.
I have a suggestion.
Wait for the microphone.
We want to hear you. I have a suggestion. You and the county commissioners all convince people to deal with people in Carroll County so we can make more money and then we can pay more taxes.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I don't know if you'll want to take a stab at this or not, but charter government has re-entered the local conversation. And I just off the cuff, what's kind of your take from a budgetary standpoint on charter government?
Can you just repeat that?
Yeah.
Just repeat it.
He's asking about charter government and the budget. I'd say, clearly there are a few specific costs. You would have a county assuming you have a county executive, it doesn't have to have a charter that way. You might have a few other personnel. Other than that, I don't believe there's any inherent connection between your form of government and how much you spend. We can spend lots of money as a commissioner form of government, or we could spend money as a charter government. I don't buy the connection. All right, well, looks like we're done then. Thank you, as always, for coming out.
Thank you, Ted. So we got you next year, right, Ted? Where's your contract? I'm going to double your pay, okay? Don't worry. I'm going to double your pay. 2 times 0 is still 0, isn't it? Yes, if you guys enjoyed hearing Ted speak, put on your calendars. I'm assuming we usually do this the third Thursday. It'll be February 20th of 2020. So maybe that could be a lucky number. Also, if you enjoyed hearing Ted speak, Ted does 1 full day of our Leadership Carroll class, and we're taking applications right now for next year. Ted will be happy to spend the day with you for our local government day. And that's always an awesome day. So please go on to our website. If you've never been to Leadership Carroll, you should really look to sign up for that. One thing that Ted said in the beginning that I disagree with, he said he sent us all those bullet points so we could maybe talk about one of his qualifications. I think it's pretty impressive to give all of them, and that's just a small bit. Ted is a rock star for what he does across the state, and we are lucky to have him here. I just thank you so much, Ted. You've been great to have, especially the year when you wore the AC/DC T-shirt. I really appreciated that. So give him a round of applause. And our sponsors, boy, we got you guys for next year again, right? For next year? We're on television? Okay, we got them for next year. RLH, from our system, you guys have been members of ours, I think, for like 65 years. That's impressive. Thank you for that. Thank you. And Dave, I didn't know this was your 20th anniversary, but in our records, you've been a member of ours for 20 years. So thank you again to you. The Chamber is celebrating this is our 95th year, and we've got about 580 members or so. So we're making the push. Tell your friends that they should join. I think it was Sam who said in the back a message that I always say, and that's that there's so many things that you cannot control in this world, so many things that frustrate you, so many things that happen either in Annapolis or Washington that you'd love to make a change, and you can't. You can give your voice, but you really can't affect that change. Well, you can affect how well we spend our money here in Carroll. There's so many places where you should be looking before you go online, before you leave the area. Please, keep your money local. It goes a long way. Support other local businesses. I want to thank the staff of the Best Western. Nice job here. Give them a round of applause. Also, Miss Peggy Soper, give her a round of applause. She puts a lot of work into these. And the Community Media Center. Hey, man, for streaming this thing live, nice job. So only because I have the microphone, and we are being streamed live, and we still have like a minute or two left. It's my daughter's birthday today. So Megan this is her birthday. So everybody, the camera's over here. I want everyone to turn and look at the camera. We're all going to say happy birthday, Megan, when I count to 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Megan. Woo, very good, thank you. My only daughter, what can I tell you? And I want to thank Jason Stambaugh for doing a good job. First time out of the box. She did okay. Give her a round of applause. You could have been better, but no, you did really good. All right, we are accepting applications right now for the Carroll Biz Challenge. This is an amazing event that we do. We do a lot of things that we don't, that folks a lot of the time don't know are our events. You know, we do a lot of meetings like this that are excellent. We have a lot of after-hour events, but we do a lot of amazing community events that we've branded so well, people just say, well, it's the Carroll Biz. And this is, I think, our 8th year. So we're taking applications right now. It's kind of like a softer Shark Tank type of a show. But we're taking local applicants who can win lots of money. And the event itself is on August 8th, and you can go to carrollbizchallenge.com. We're open right now for applications. And as I said, we're taking applications for Leadership Carroll. We've got some great meetings coming up that are all on our website, carrollcountychamber.org. We've got Outstanding Teacher Awards. We've been doing this for decades. That's March 27th. We've got our annual Drug Expo, where I think we bring in like 2,500 kids, 8th grade, high school. That's on April 18th. Please, you should come to that. It's an amazing event. We do our annual Public Safety Awards. That's on May 15th. That's police, fire, and first responders. Our annual meeting this year is going to be October 25th, and it's going to be a party at Martin's, and you should probably come to that. That'll be good. And we do a lot of grand openings. We did 22 grand openings last year. So our calendar of events has all of these things. Go to the grand opening. Support local businesses that are opening up. It's such a boost to them, please. Last but not least, we like to have fun on top of all these things. Well, we have fun the whole time. We like to take some trips. We've been to Cuba, China, all kinds of places. We're going to Greece this year. If you haven't signed up yet, it's probably too late. It's filled. But we're doing a Danube River cruise October 20th of this year. We have an informational meeting tonight and a webinar Tuesday for that. So we like to have a lot of fun. If you want to go to Greece, come see me. There may be a little bit of room left. Other than that, we've kept you here long enough. Thank you again to Ted. Thank you to everybody, okay?